Welcome everyone, I am Jeff, the Seattle Ring Hunter. A quick introduction. I am a lost item recovery specialist working on land and also underwater with scuba diving gear for items as small as wedding rings. With that being said, for the past 10 years on land, 7 years in the water, I occasionally come across situations where the equipment that I use needs some form of modification or thinking outside of the box to develop something to make the job more efficient or effective for the needs at hand. This here is an example of how currently I have faced a challenge. I will explain. Let's do a bit of a deeper dive into this current project. So as you see on the screen, we have the Quest or the Techniques, but this is quite popular pinpointer metal detector. Basically, for you that are new, we use a full-size metal detector as we're diving, looking for lost items in the silt. Most times a silty zero visibility situation. And as we find targets, we will move the large detector to the side and then turn on the pinpointer to get a real fine pinpoint and scoop up the item out of the silt to see if it's our target. The X-Pointer Pro, as shown here, I have been using for the last couple of years, and I'm very happy with its performance. It is a pretty good pinpointer. You may have seen Michael Oliver using it heavily, as he's got a lot of Quest products on his channel, on his YouTube channel, and I was aware of them before he was utilizing them as well at a large scale. For shallower waters, I will say that this pinpointer works really well. And if I can draw your attention to the gray buttons, there's two of them, a power button and a mode button. And it's a more pliable, rubberized button material that has basically been infused with the plastic case. And you just basically press it with your thumb. Well, there's a situation that as divers, you would know the deeper you go, gas starts to compress, and that inside of that pinpointer container, since it is waterproof and they have certified it or claim you can operate it down to 200 feet, farther than probably anybody's ever really utilized a pinpointer. I don't believe any tech divers are running around with one currently at 200 feet. And if you're out there, get in touch with me. We could have some fun discussions. That being said, and you're in the 15 to 20 foot range, the water pressure isn't touching or isn't compressing the gas enough to make any difference on the input of those buttons. But I can say and testify that at 60 feet, it absolutely does compress the gas on the inside of the pinpointer. It draws in the membrane, therefore pressing both buttons full on, because this pinpointer actually has momentary and long press. It understands that for different features on it. And I will say that Quest, through the Techniques, the engineers that originally developed this pinpointer were cognizant of this potential, so they developed the software to have a thing called dive mode, and it basically will put it into a mode situation. There's a tilt sensor on the inside of this pinpointer, and if you do a cycle of taking the tip and going up and down 3 times, you can wake it up out of sleep mode. If you're at depth, it will start to work as long as the tip is pointed down, and then to put it back into sleep mode to where it's not making noise, you're supposed to have the tip pointed straight up. Well, in theory, that's a cheap way of using software to get around a situation, but functionally and in reality, practicality, it really kind of sucks and doesn't really work all that well, and it draws more frustration. My situation with headphones on from the Deus 2, XP Deus 2, it is in a special dive mode where the buttons are actually locked out before I drop down on my dive and descend. So any pressure against the button pads on that metal detector just simply locks it out. So that machine is currently on throughout the whole dive. And to have this pinpointer going off randomly because I holster it on my metal detector shaft in a horizontal position, it doesn't put it in sleep mode, and it's a metal shaft, extruded aluminum metal shaft. And so as I carry on here a little bit in detail, you start to understand at 60 feet, I have a limited amount of air available, trying to get a very specific, lost, very valuable target acquired, and I'm getting frustrated and a little bit flustered with this pinpointer making noise in the background to the point where I almost wanted to just throw it to the side or just get rid of it. And at some point throughout a few dives, I just didn't even take it because it wasn't even practical to take down on the dive at that point. It's too much of a problem. So I had to think outside of the box. And as I've done in the past, that brings me to what can we do as far as the button technology on this pinpointer. The pinpointer works very well for the application as far as detecting small pieces of metal in the silt. So I came up with what I've done in the past, and that is to utilize the piezo button technology. Now, for those that aren't familiar with piezo button technology, as you'll see here, these little round disc buttons, you may have seen them on some devices. They're not all that common for normal electronic devices, so to speak, but for certain applications, if you needed like in industry, they need explosion-proof button switches that need to be sealed and don't have sparks of any sort, or in a gas environment or in unstable gases, and you have equipment and technicians working, but also the marine division for anything underwater with pressure. As you look at these images here, this is actually, they do them in stainless steel, but it's really not all that necessary. These are machined aluminum housings, and the underneath the top surface that you press on, the button pad itself, is a piezoelectric element, and the small amount of pressure, when you apply pressure on it, will bend the piezoelectric crystal, which will generate a small current, a sensing voltage for the circuit to know that you've pressed the button momentarily, and therefore changing the modes or doing whatever the device is programmed to do once it receives a button press. So these are absolutely amazing. They've been around for a number of years, and they have proven themselves even at depth. As we go along here, we have Light Monkey. They've been making Delrin machined dive lights for tech divers and cave divers, and these guys are going down several hundred feet. And you can see on here the little round button right above the cable as it comes into the device. And they learned a long time ago that these are absolutely amazing buttons. Another example, we've got the Santee, which is a dive company, and they have a underwater battery system for garment heating. So electric heated garments underneath a dry suit. They wanted a waterproof button system, so the water would not get into the battery, of course. It needs to be completely sealed, but something that's easy. Also, I must say, as a diver with dry gloves on or neoprene gloves, we need to be able to actuate, or we need to be able to trigger the button easily enough without any problems. These buttons are large enough to do that, even the smaller ones, and they work absolutely amazing. So my next example is a company called Shearwater. They've been in the business of making high-end, some of the best dive computers in the dive industry for many, many years. And they have a handful of dive computers ranging from the $500 price point up into the $2,000 price point, utilizing piezoelectric buttons. And we really want everyone to understand here that is watching this that these dive computers are pretty much viewed as life support equipment, very serious, extremely serious for open circuit divers as well as closed circuit divers that have to rely upon their computers to always monitor their PO2, their oxygen levels, and their gas levels, and it's a very serious situation. So these companies have invested a lot of time, money, and energy understanding this. And just as an example, we have the Perdix 2 on the screen here with the two buttons, one on the left and the right. They're fully capable with even just momentary presses. There's no long press option with the piezoelectric button, but it really is not a showstopper or discredit even with the pinpointer application. Software can be designed to utilize a 1-2 button press to get through a menu system if absolutely needed. The pinpointer, of course, is much more rudimentary in operation, and it really isn't necessary to do too much with any of the software. That is the good news. What I am trying to make a point about is that For example, some people were concerned about depth and operating depth for these piezoelectric push buttons. And the Perdix 2 is certified for 850 feet, guys. And the Nerd 2, which we see here in the other screen, having the same small piezoelectric buttons, is certified to 985 feet. And quite frankly, I don't know anyone who's taking these little pinpointers past 100 feet, to be honest. Most recreational divers don't have much time to do a search, anything past 60 to 70 feet for any amount of time. So the reality is yes, absolutely. The piezoelectric push buttons that I am proposing here are an absolute amazing selection, probably the top and best selection in the industry as far as button technology for marine applications at depth in the water for any type of device. So I want to make that very loud and clear, because part of this video, to be honest, is to kind of drum up some support from the manufacturers, as they always have a listening ear to some extent. I also understand it's a tough call as they are trying to reach a broader market, and it's quite frankly not the tech divers or the recreational divers that are down looking for treasure in the water with their devices. And so that price point, making a little rubber button pad and some basic buttons, on a printed circuit board is what they have currently, and that is a little cheaper. So that kind of wins out in the long run, unfortunately. So I had to take this situation into my own hands, as I did a couple of years ago with the Excalibur 2 metal detector, and that's using an even older switching technology. Was radial pots, like volume knobs that you used to twist with your thumb and forefinger, and a click to turn on and off, and to increase the volume or audio output, you would rotate it clockwise or counterclockwise. Yes, they still utilize that with the O-ring seals, and it takes a bit of time to turn the machine on and off. I have a full video on my Excalibur 2 piezo button project, and to tell you guys, for the last couple of years, it has been working absolutely amazing. I can just tap the back of the battery pack and turn off that whole system within a second, and I can get to business with the pinpointer, because those two devices can't be on at the same time. It causes a lot of interference. Even when you try to move the coil away from the pinpointer, and that was what the problem was at that time, I don't have as much of a problem with that with the Deus 2 multi-frequency machine that I'm currently using for most of my dives. So as I had already indicated earlier in this little chat, I have reasons why I need to utilize the piezo buttons on the current pinpointer. But what I am happy to say is that the piezoelectric button was absolutely the correct and best solution I could find to basically make a power switch where I can just bump it with my thumb, either in a neoprene 7mm dive glove or even dry gloves that are a bit bulky, and it doesn't take much pressure with the hand, and it's been working absolutely great. So here's another picture of it here after the project was completed. That's a piece of Delrin plastic that was machined and glued on with a very specific industry application, two-part epoxy that makes those two pieces of plastic stick together enough and keep it waterproof at the same time. Moving along here are the two small piezoelectric buttons that I sourced for my current project, and of course spent some time once they showed up to see if they were going to work, or if there was going to be additional circuitry necessary to get it to trigger the X pointer circuit to turn on and change modes. Basically, I have one is a power button, which is the one that's furthest away from the tail cap, and the one that's closest to the tail cap is a mode button. And fortunately for me, I was very excited to find out it was just basically soldering them directly in parallel with the current buttons that are on the circuit board, and no additional circuitry was needed. I will say that I also had to make a modification on the inside of the case components for the X pointer to disable the functionality of the gray rubber button pads. Basically just took a pair of nippers and cut down some of the plastic nubs on the underneath the button pad. So pressing full in with my thumb with as much pressure as possible for the most part, and it just no longer engages those switches. They're still actually on the circuit board, but you cannot engage them by pressing on the gray button pads. So that has been disabled, and the piezoelectric buttons have been soldered in place of those and working absolutely great. At this point, and all along throughout this project, my mind had been going on what type of system, what type of fixation or mounting structure was I going to use to get these piezoelectric buttons adapted to this pinpointer. Obviously, it was never designed, the case wasn't designed to have these size of buttons on the inside of it. There's no space inside, so that's why a little bit of bulkiness to support these buttons had to be generated. Since my last project with the Excalibur 2 and the power button, I used Delrin plastic. I had someone machine a piece specifically to my design. And since then, I've come across and made acquaintances with a retired engineer gentleman, and he doesn't want to really be put out, and he's not looking to take on jobs and making parts for everybody in the metal detection community. So with that being said, a big shout out and thank you to him. He knows who he is, and he knows I very much appreciate his efforts, and he's looking for little challenges here and there. So this project landed on his desk. I packed up the buttons and one of the pinpointers and shipped it out to him. And he received that, and within just a short period of time, he had already whipped up a very extremely nice 3D printed button mount block system. So as you can see, it turned out absolutely amazing. I was able to make a small hole, just enough to pass the 4 wires from the 2 piezo buttons through the pinpointer case, and I've completely sealed that up with Bondit from Realtek down in California. They've been in the industry for a number of years, making industry grade specific 2-part epoxy and potting compounds specifically for polymers, plastics, and Delrin, and all the other types of plastics that are very difficult to get adhesion on because of their natural lubricative properties of those plastics. So I was happy to utilize that and realize the advantage of that on the Excalibur 2 project, and got myself a fresh batch of that Bondit application just for this project, as my other ones were a few years old and expired. So I want to make sure that I was using fresh product, and it has glued up, and it is currently cured, and tomorrow will be the first maiden voyage of this pinpointer project at depth at 60 feet. So I look forward to utilizing it with great success, and hopefully we'll have another story and a report of another amazing recovery of a valuable item that a gentleman had lost recently in the lake at 60 feet. So hopefully we can share that very soon. Here's a bit of a view of the project and how it turned out. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions whatsoever, please leave some comments down below. Like, share, and subscribe. And if you're once again in the Washington State area and you've lost anything of value, either in your house, your car, grass, sand, or with needing scuba at depth, give me a call at 206-618-8194. Let's have a quick discussion over the phone to find out what your specific needs are and how we might figure out what the next steps are in your recovery process. And again, if you lose anything of value, remember, if you drop an item of value, drop a pin with your cell phone or your chart plotter if you're on a boat or a fish finder. Get a GPS location right over the top of that drop zone. It'll make it so much easier, and you will be happy that you did that.
If you've lost your ring or special item of value, please get in touch with me at the SeattleRingHunter.com as soon as possible so I can arrange to do a search for you.